This video is part of the 2020 GRESB Assessment Training Program. It will cover the changes to the GRESB Fund Assessment in 2020 relative to 2019. Note that this lesson is aimed at participants who have participated in 2019 and are looking to understand what has changed. For introductory training on the GRESB Fund Assessment, you should follow the lessons on structure, management component, and performance component. We'll start with an overview of the structure of the fund assessment in 2020. We'll then take an in-depth look at the changes in the fund management component. Along the way, we'll also review the changes in scoring and the new participation fee structure. Finally, we'll conclude this lesson by explaining how this new assessment structure impacts the output and results of 2020. By the end of this lesson, you should understand the main changes to the fund assessment and be able to complete the infrastructure fund assessment in 2020, assuming that you participated in 2019. We'll begin with an overview of the changes in structure. In 2020, the GRESB infrastructure assessments have been split into two components, a management component and a performance component. Both the fund and asset assessments consist of management and performance components, but it is important to note that a fund does not complete a performance component itself. Instead, the underlying assets of the fund comprise the fund's performance component. If more than 25% of the fund's underlying assets complete the infrastructure asset assessment, the scores of these assets are averaged and the fund will obtain a performance score infrastructure fund. For the asset assessment score to contribute to the performance score of a participating fund, the fund must be linked to the asset. There is a simple process for this that is described in detail in the lesson Fund Assessment Performance Component. It is good to note that the new split is in fact a formalization of the structure that was already in place. It does not alter the fund assessment itself, but it helps to clarify naming conventions and with an overall understanding of the assessment. 30% of the GRESB assessment infrastructure fund score is determined by the results of the management component infrastructure fund. The remaining 70% is determined by the underlying assets. We have renamed the scores for greater clarity and made the management component score out of 30 and the performance score out of 70, such that they simply add together to form the fund's GRESB score. The management component measures the entity's strategy and leadership management, policies and processes, risk management, and stakeholder engagement approaches, and comprises information collected at the entity level. The performance component measures the entity's performance based on the results of the asset assessments of the entity's underlying assets. We'll now review the changes to the entity and reporting characteristics. New indicators were added to align with the management component in the infrastructure asset assessment, such as a new indicator on the entity's commencement date, an indicator on the nature of the entity's business, and a new indicator on a description of the fund. Two indicators on sector and geography were merged into one. The new indicator is called Sector and Geography. Finally, the indicator on summary of entity assets has been moved into entity and reporting characteristics. Next are the key changes in the management component. The changes in the management component are largely structural. New answer options were added to increase alignment with internal and external frameworks. Also new is the aspect structure, now similar to the infrastructure asset and real estate assessments. Finally, one indicator was removed, several others were moved, and 4 indicators were added. We have undertaken extensive work to review alignment with external and internal frameworks. Based on this work, we've made adjustments so that the management component for infrastructure fund is aligned with the infrastructure asset and real estate management components, helping participants that are working on multiple submissions to stay organized and to facilitate referencing. External alignment has focused on using similar nomenclature and concepts to facilitate those participants reporting to multiple sustainability frameworks. In 2019, the fund assessment was not organized into aspects. Instead, each indicator was referenced as fund, followed by a number. To align with the other GRESB assessments, the indicators have been restructured into 5 aspects. New indicator titles are also added to make referencing easier. We'll run through the changes for the indicators in each aspect. The first aspect is leadership, where a significant change has been the restructuring of the indicator ESG leadership commitments. In the new structure, the commitments have been split to distinguish those that are general and those that are issue-specific, as well as commitments that require organizations to take action and those that do not. The aspect policies consists of 3 indicators, which have been newly split into environmental, social, and governance policies. The third aspect, reporting, contains 3 indicators. 2 of these are new in 2020. The indicator ESG reporting is new, but actually consists of 2 indicators from 2019 that have been merged. Participants can select where they disclose their ESG actions first. This opens another list of options where the details of the disclosure can be provided, including the level of third-party review. The information on third-party review was previously a separate indicator. The second new indicator in this aspect is on ESG incident occurrence. This indicator is not scored and used for reporting purposes only. Do note that the information may be used as a criterion in the recognition of sector leaders. Under the aspect risk management, the indicator on monitoring of ESG performance of assets has been removed, as this is covered by the underlying asset assessment. The 5th and final aspect in the management component is on stakeholder engagement. The indicator inclusion and diversity, which was introduced in 2019, is now scored, and 3 indicators were added. These new indicators are Employee Engagement Program, Employee Training, and Employee Satisfaction Monitoring. These indicators will not be scored in 2020. We'll now take a look at the scoring changes in 2020. The GRESB score for the Infrastructure Fund assessment comprises the scores for the 2 components. 30% of the GRESB assessment Infrastructure Fund score is determined by the results of the Management Component Infrastructure Fund. The remaining 70% is determined by the underlying assets if more than 25% of the fund's underlying assets complete the infrastructure asset assessment. The weighted average scores of these assets give the fund the Performance Score Infrastructure Fund. The management score and performance score for the fund add together to form the GRESB score for the fund. Most of the scoring changes to the indicators are minor. For the indicators ESG Senior Decision Maker and ESG Incident Monitoring, new answer options are also scored. The indicators in the policy aspect are all scored, and the indicator Inclusion and Diversity, which was added in 2019, is now scored. Now we'll review the participation fees. The assessment participation fee applies to all GRESB assessments. This means that infrastructure assets will need to pay a participation fee in 2020. Participants may choose to complete just one or all of the assessment components, management, performance, or development, but the standard participation fee applies regardless. First-year participating entities and entities headquartered in non-OECD countries can participate in the GRESB assessments for free. The entity will be benchmarked and receive a free scorecard. They will have the option of purchasing a benchmark report, which is the same amount as the participation fee. Note that the first-year participants will only have this option in their first year. Other products and services, like response checks, customized benchmark reports, training seats, etc., are no longer bundled with the assessment participation fee. This allows participants to select only those products and services they require. Let's conclude by looking at the 2020 timeline. The assessment portal is open from April 1st to August 1st, midnight Pacific Daylight Time. Note that we've extended the deadline in 2020 and other dates may change in the future. We are reviewing the situation around COVID-19 and will communicate any other changes to the dates listed in the timeline well in advance. We have tried to minimize the number of changes in 2020, focusing instead on the new structure. Most of the new indicators are in entity and reporting characteristics and have been added to improve benchmarking and provide additional meaningful information to investors. None of the newly added indicators are scored in 2020. Thank you for taking the time to complete this lesson. We hope that it helped you get a better understanding of the changes to the GRESB fund assessment and prepared you to complete the assessment accurately. For any questions, you can contact us at gresb.com/contact.